Russia investigation may have come from a conversation between a former Trump advisor and an Australian diplomat after a night of heavy drinking, according to the New York Times. The Times bar back in May of 2016, George Papadopoulos told an Australian diplomat that Russia had political dirt on Hillary Clinton. Australian officials later notified the U.S. about that conversation when WikiLeaks began posting emails hacked from the Democratic National Committee. I want to bring in our political panel to discuss. Scott Jennings is a CNN political commentator and former special assistant to President George W. Bush. We've also got Marc Lamont. He's the host of BET News, as well as a professor at Temple University and a CNN political commentator. Gentlemen, thank you both for joining us. Scott, first to you. This report undermines one of the main defenses from the White House about George Papadopoulos, that he was just a coffee boy. Democrats have jumped all over this. Take a look at some of these tweets. This is from former Obama aide Tommy Vitor. Low-level foreign policy staffers don't set up head of state meetings. Trust me, I was one. This coming as one of the revelations in the report is that Papadopoulos helped set up a meeting between then President Trump and Egyptian President Fattah al-Sisi. Here's another tweet from Representative Ted Lieu of California. He writes, quote, "Keep in mind, no one was really aware of George Papadopoulos until his guilty plea was revealed. That tells us Special Counsel Mueller knows far more than people think, and Papadopoulos is cooperating with Mueller. The White House should be scared." Scott, first off, what do you make of this report? And second off, should the White House be concerned?
Well, I mean, look, the White House should be concerned about this investigation comprehensively because obviously they're looking into things that could reach into the inner sanctum of the White House. But we know that already. Here's the deal with Papadopoulos. I don't believe this report really tells us anything we didn't already know. The New York Times makes perfectly clear he was not central to the day-to-day running of the Trump campaign. That's a direct quote from the article. And he was out doing things at times as an unpaid volunteer that clearly he should not have been doing. This guy did not show good discretion. He was out drinking and carousing and spilling secrets and BSing with people in other countries. And he was obviously someone who was prone to exaggerating his resume. And then he, of course, got caught lying to the FBI. This was not a good person. And there's no question the Trump campaign failed a basic issue you do in presidential campaigns, and that's vet and Google the people who show up on your front door asking for a job. In this case, Papadopoulos, a known liar, a known exaggerator, did things he shouldn't have done. He's lied to the FBI, but by no means does that prove we have any wrongdoing on the part of President Trump or even people at the top reaches of the campaign.
Mark, Scott says that this reporting from the New York Times doesn't really tell us much we didn't already know. Do you agree?
It confirms what we already suspected. I mean, there's a question about how central Papadopoulos was. I agree. He may not have been a paid member of the campaign. He may have been drawing outside of the lines a little bit, and he may be a sketchy figure who's dishonest. But Trump has a history of having people in his campaign who are sketchy and dishonest and who exaggerate their resume and their accomplishments. We can't, so it's sort of difficult to dismiss his word because he's a bad guy when Trump surrounded himself with bad guys. I've been a coffee boy before, and I've worked on campaigns before, and at no point was I ever asked to connect to a head of state. When Trump ran for president, he had two really big foreign policy visions. One was to mend the relationship with Russia, whatever that means, and it was also to rearrange things in the Middle East, particularly around Israel-Palestine. If Papadopoulos is making connections to Abdel Fattah al-Sisi in Egypt, which is key to the Israel-Palestine relationship, and Trump is listening intently as Papadopoulos, as the report suggests, is promising to be able to connect him to Putin, then that means to me that he's involved right in the muck of foreign policy. That means that he's bigger than we thought he was. It's no surprise that he spilled secrets. It's no surprise that he's dishonest. That isn't new information. But what is new information, or at least more helpful information, is the fact that we now know that he was the trigger for this investigation, not a document, not a report, nothing else, that he is the spark that started this whole thing.
Scott, I'm surprised the timing isn't suspicious to you because Papadopoulos is apparently telling this Australian diplomat that Russia had dirt on Hillary Clinton about a month or so before the DNC came out and acknowledged that it had been hacked and that emails were stolen. So if he's just a coffee boy, how does he have this information that nobody else has?
Look, I don't know whether this guy was a coffee boy or not. Clearly, he was out there portraying himself as something that perhaps he was not, and he was sharing things that he had learned from people in the campaign when he shouldn't have been doing that. There's no question about that. This guy, I mean, the last person you want working on a presidential campaign is someone like Papadopoulos or even Carter Page. These people who serially exaggerate their connections, they exaggerate their resumes, they lie about their life experience because they are prone to having bad judgment and doing the kinds of things Papadopoulos has done. I hope it turns out that this is all we find out about Papadopoulos, that this doesn't go any further. But I will tell you, this is a cautionary tale. If you're running a presidential campaign, you have to look into these people who come and orbit your campaign. Anybody who's worked in presidential politics knows the type. These Papadopoulos and Carter Page types, they are attracted to politics like moths to flames, and you have to have the judgment to weed them out. At the beginning of the Trump campaign, they did not have that kind of structure in place. I believe they put that structure in place as they went on into the fall.
Mark, yeah, Scott, the problem is, I agree with you. But we can't, that's not exculpatory for Donald Trump. We can't say, well, Trump had bad judgment and picked bad guys, so therefore we can't listen to the bad guys that did the bad stuff after he picked them. Both are true. Trump made bad choices at the beginning and probably in the middle and the end, but that doesn't mean that we can't listen to what they're saying. Again, this isn't purely what Papadopoulos is telling us. The New York Times had other investigators. They had other sources. This stuff has been corroborated. It's very clear here that he had a far deeper involvement with the campaign than he's suggesting, and then certainly what Trump spokesmen are suggesting, which is that he was just some ancillary figure. He's not an ancillary figure if he's involved in key meetings. He's not an ancillary figure if he's drawing connections, and he's not an ancillary figure if he has information that isn't leaked to the mainstream press until a month later. He clearly knew things, and that's why the Australian officials were so triggered a month later when the DNC announced the leak.
And Scott, does it surprise you that these Australian officials, once they saw the announcement that the DNC had been hacked, immediately went to the FBI, but no one on the Trump campaign, or at least George Papadopoulos, who apparently had some inkling that something was going on, approached federal investigators, officials, to tell them, hey, Russia may be doing something illegal?
Well, it doesn't surprise me what the Australians did, because they're a good friend of ours and they're a good ally, and so they did what they should have done. And I think hindsight for the Trump campaign is 20/20 on this, on whether they should have gone to the authorities. And look, there's still a lot we don't know about what the Trump campaign did know or did do or did not do at this time. I mean, obviously things are coming out all the time. What we do know at this point is, and I think our legal analyst here at CNN, Paul Callan, has said this many times on the air, there is nothing so far that has come out that shows a conspiracy among two or more people to violate federal law. That's what we're looking for here. Whether Papadopoulos did some of these things or not, and whether he did things we don't yet know about, what we've not seen from the special counsel is a conspiracy to violate federal law in the space of collusion. One thing I think the Republicans have to do, they have to acknowledge strongly the meddling without knowing yet whether there was actual collusion. There's no evidence of collusion, but we have to acknowledge that there was meddling. Clearly the Russians were trying to cultivate sources and meddle digitally in our election. We have to get on with dealing with that even as this investigation continues. I think the Republicans need to draw that line and at least acknowledge and work on stopping a foreign hostile power from meddling in our election in the future.
Mark, a quick 10-second response.
I agree that they have to concede the point about meddling. I think the concern for many of us is that there's smoke and fire here, and that if they begin to acknowledge the meddling, it'll get to the collusion. Again, there's a lot more to be known, there's a lot more to be investigated, but this most recent revelation is certainly telling, and it's certainly encouraging people in the law enforcement community to keep digging.
Marc Lamont, Scott Jennings, appreciate the time, gentlemen. Happy New Year to you both.